Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Good Girls Get Rich. I'm your host, Karen Yankovich, and I am excited to be here today with Meg Dennison. Meg and I have known each other for a few years now. I love the work she does. So much of what Meg does is so aligned with the principles that are important to me, and I'm assuming to you since you're listening. And I really wanted you to get to know Meg. And she's been on my list for a while to have on the show. So I'm excited to have her here today. So a little bit about Meg. Meg has been teaching conscious leadership practices for over a decade, empowering hundreds of women to meet their ambition and own their authority. She's done this through one-to-one coaching, business workshops, live retreats, deep dives at her beautiful home in Santa Cruz, California. Meg's passion has always been supporting women and girls in their leadership journeys. She cares deeply that women have the skills and support to share their genius and achieve their vision. Meg's devotion to personal transformation makes her an inspiring force to her clients, and she radically transformed her own life through the very work that she teaches women leaders. Meg reinvented her 38-year marriage to the same guy she met working on the college newspaper. She's also reimagined her own career in midlife and switched coasts after launching her 3 kids. Meg loves the outdoors, whether it's taking her big black Labrador retriever for a run on the beach, biking, skiing, or simply enjoying the stillness of a mountaintop. So, Meg, I am so happy to have you here with us today. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, yeah, oh no. Yeah. So I'm so glad we're finally able to do this. And just before we got on, I was telling Meg that I had just visited Santa Cruz and absolutely love the weather. So when Meg talks about enjoying the stillness of a mountaintop, I can now picture exactly where she is, because there's just such, I don't know, I really thoroughly enjoyed being in California. All right, so Meg, you've got personal experience with conscious leadership. You do this work with your clients and transformation. Can you tell us a little bit about, like, they heard your official bio, but tell us a little bit about, like, the behind the scenes. What brought you to doing this work? And tell us a little bit about what conscious leadership actually is.
Yes. So I think the best way to tell you about it is just to say from, like, I came into conscious leadership, which I think of, okay, conscious, you're awake, you're aware, and your leadership is inspired by actually being awake and aware about yourself, about what's going on around you. And also, conscious leaders, in my book, take responsibility for their impact on the world. Okay? So
that's so important, Meg. That's so important. You know, I often say that with visibility comes responsibility. And we have to remember that when we are more visible, and we are all becoming more visible, that's a big part of what we talk about here on the show, there is a responsibility to that, right? Even like we hear this even with like sports stars, right? Like professional athletes, they have a responsibility, right? To understand the impact they're having on their fans and their followers. I love that you bring that same concept to you and me and to the people that are listening.
Yeah. And to everyone. Actually, I think of, conscious leadership is you want your CEO, you want your leaders to be practicing it, but you can also have an impact. It will help you, being conscious of what motivates you, of how you show up, of opening yourself up to feedback can really help you expand your influence, which I'm really all about for women. I want women to be more influential.
Yeah. Well, I think as we are moving into, so this is going to be going live at the end of 2024 as we move into 2025. I think that it's important, right? Because when the pandemic hit, the world got noisy, right? The world got noisy and everybody was on social media. Everybody was, posting all over the place. And I think what we're recognizing now, a couple of years later, is that if you are not standing out, you're invisible with all this noise, right? So creating this more visible, more conscious brand of yourself and stepping into that and owning that, I think it's never been more important than it is now.
Yeah, and it's important from a business point of view, but it's also important for a personal point of view. For people to really, and especially women, to really own who they are and to own their gifts and to know what they want. And that's one of the things that I see with a lot of women is they actually don't even know what they want out of life, out of, every day. right? Because
Yeah.
many of us have grown up with just a lot of expectations about how we
Right.
do things. Yeah.
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 Well, that's why I did this podcast, right? If you go back to episode 1, and you can check that out at KarenYankovich.com/001, I talk about that is exactly why I did this podcast. I grew
Mhm.
up, in the 70s when, where we were there was it was such a different world for women than it is
Yeah.
now. And I had to unlearn so much to be able to be where
Yes.
I'm at right now. And,
Yeah.
you know, I'm so grateful that for my daughters and hopefully my granddaughters, it's not going to be the same. That I think there's way too much that's still there, but I think a lot. I mean, listen, I go back pretty far to where girls couldn't even wear pants to school when I started school. You had to wear a dress every day. So, like, it was. It's changed a lot, and but those things are still kind of ingrained in us, right? Like, we still
Yes. Yeah.
remember that.
Yeah, and getting past that, actually recognizing what your true, I want to say, your true nature is, and
Mhm.
what you're developing your skills. If you have ambition, you want to
Mhm.
have the skills to meet that ambition, and
Love
that's a
that.
lot of what I do with helping women become conscious leaders. And I want to back up a sec, because you asked me how I got into this,
Mhm.
and how I and for me, it's the journey of myself as a conscious leader and as a coach has been a very personal one. So I actually learned about conscious leadership from my husband, who worked at a big New York media company, and one day had a huge meltdown at his office and was told, go, he was a jerk boss, right? He was a jerk boss, and he was told to go
Oh
fix
gosh.
yourself.
Okay.
And so he did.
Well, thank God they told him to go fix himself, right? And
Yeah,
not just go
yeah.
take a hike.
Yeah, well, that was the next thing. That was the next thing. So he went and fixed himself. And what he happened to find, he's discovered a coach who taught conscious leadership principles. And so he brought that to his office. And those principles, candor, taking 100% responsibility, really knowing what you want. uh, well, he worked with his team and had a high performing team, and a team that still loves him 15 years later. But he brought those principles home into our relationship. So we actually became, our kind of couplehood was became kind of a stew pot for practicing conscious leadership. We would actually do things like, the drama triangle. We would practice the drama triangle. Oh, are you in victim,
Really?
villain, or hero now?
Mhm.
Those kinds of things as part of our relationship. So I like to say that all of the things that I teach, and I teach, I work with teams and I work with leaders, but all of those things, I can also help people and support people with the same things, because it works at home and it
Yep.
works in your other relationships,
Yeah.
with your friends,
Yes,
and how
with
you
your
show up.
family, with your kids, with your parents, all
Yeah,
the
your
people,
family,
right?
your kids.
All the
Right,
people,
right.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. So how does it impact us, though, as, like, most of my audience are women who are stepping into a new chapter, right? So
Yes.
maybe you were in corporate and now you're leaving corporate,
Yeah.
because, well, let's step back to something before we get there. You mentioned earlier that so many women don't really know how to identify what they want. That feeds right into, I think, many of the women listening right now in my audience,
Mhm.
because I think what a lot of women are starting to do is identifying what they don't want, right? Maybe they don't want to be where they are right now, but they're not really sure what it is, what the next chapter looks like, and how to kind of map that out for themselves, right? So how do you help people with that?
Yeah, well, two ways. Two ways. And one is, a lot of times, we talk about time management, and I think a lot about energy management. So, one of the reasons that people want to
Yes.
move into another job, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so done with this, because their energy has just been sapped,
Yeah.
right? So, I invite people to go through your week and actually just look at what do I love? What is neutral? And what is dragging me down? And keep a log of that and see if you can minimize some of those things. And this is actually the first the tenet of conscious leadership is taking 100% responsibility for what you're creating. Yeah, there are lots of things going on out there, but you are responsible. You're responsible for managing your energy and for, finding out what lifts you and what brings you down. So that's one thing. And the other thing is to really explore what is in your zone of genius. And I know we've talked about this before, but your zone of genius is that thing that you do that when you do it, you're better than most people. You do it better than most people, and time disappears. So you are basically in a state of flow. Now, you may say, oh, I can't have that all the time. But you actually can work more of that in. And if you are in a position of you may be doing things that don't serve you anymore, that don't serve you as an executive on the rise.
Oh my gosh, so true.
Yeah.
So true. So, continue.
Well, I just wanted to say, to get rid of, look again, track those things. Look at what is it that you do that you are actually pretty incompetent at, and then get rid of that stuff. Or even if you're just competent at it, there's so many things that you can delegate, right?
Yes.
And then you get to your zone of excellence. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say one of the the big tenets of the work that I do, and she's linked up in the ecosystem with all of our programs, is let's make enough money to pay people to do the thing they don't want to do, because that's where you can now start to accelerate your business and your income. It's not by bootstrapping. Like bootstrapping is, maybe you got to do that for a little while, and there's no judgment on anybody, but when you can find that space, I like to call it flipping the funnel, right? Like where is the big money? What are the big money opportunities? And let's stay really, really focused on that so that you can bring in enough cash to pay people to do some of these tasks so that you can stay in your zone of genius more and be able to get more done. And sometimes it just takes, sometimes I just don't think, at least in my case, I don't always realize I'm doing it. I'm thinking about my morning today and a couple of things that I did. Actually, I'm going to give myself credit because I did a couple of things and I'm like, why am I doing this? And I delegated something that I have been doing myself for years, and I'm like, there's no reason. And it's one of those things that's always I procrastinate on. Right. And I was like, yes, I don't have to do this. Why am I not delegating this? So it's not, it doesn't happen overnight. Right. I think it's a process as we evolve.
Well, and also you can every now and then you can just go, do an inventory. Maybe even quarterly. What am I doing? Right. Where is, the thing about am I putting my attention on that 20% that is going to move the needle for me? But I want people to also look at moving the needle for themselves, for doing their inner work, so they can have the impact in whatever big idea or big project that they have, because that is also an important place to look at where you're moving the needle and what are the important things that you're doing. And that could be exercise, taking time out, making sure that you know how to create resilience for yourself. So things
Tell us about that, creating resilience for yourself.
Yeah, well, that's actually one of the things we're talking about, the state of the world. And here we are as we're recording this. It's I think it's 48 days to the election.
Yep.
And so creating resilience for yourself, and we're going to need, if everything is uncertain right now, and it's always been uncertain, right?
And it will continue to be uncertain regardless of the results of the election,
but
right?
Many of us feel that it is more uncertain than
Yeah. But I look at things like, who could have ever predicted a worldwide pandemic, right? So even if everything goes the way you want it to go with this election and life is good, you just don't know when something's going to come up that's going to be, oh, hang on, what do they say? Hold my beer. I got this, something else can come up. So how do you do that? How do you create resilience?
Yeah. So the way I suggest that people create resilience and resilience is a muscle, right? Mm-hmm. It's a muscle. You got to work on it because you don't know when you're going to need it. something may happen tomorrow, and you need to know how to be resilient. So resilience is, there's a knowing of yourself. What is your own, what do you need to keep yourself fresh and open? And I call to move out of defensiveness and into openness. So what do you need for that? Something happened yesterday, and it was kind of something always happens, right? And I took my dog to the beach and threw a ball for him for like 20 minutes. And that shifted me. So what are your shift moves?
Right.
What do you need to do to shift? So you should know those things, right?
Right. Because we will need to shift. It's not like it's not like, okay, well, now life is good and nothing will ever happen again. Like, we will need to shift, whether it's tiny little things or worldwide pandemics, right? We will need to shift our energy and
you know how to manage. You need to know how to manage your thoughts too.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes with, I think certain wisdom comes with every decade that you're on this earth, right? Like, you learn that this is good. Things are going to continue to change. Meg and I were talking yesterday, and I was telling her that one of the things that I've been doing this week is listening to Hillary Clinton's new book. And she starts out the book talking about Joni Mitchell and Joni Mitchell's being on stage at the Grammys, singing Both Sides Now. And I was listening to this and thinking, these two women have so many decades of wisdom, and they talk about resilience, right? Joni Mitchell went through some kind of accident, I don't know the details, but where she couldn't even speak. And now she's on stage at the Grammys singing her hit songs and not given an F about it, right? Like what she looked like, like she just was like, I'm here and I'm doing it. And I think I think Hillary Clinton knows a little bit about resilience as well. So I thought about these women, and I thought, like, this is what I love about, every decade that I get older. You get to learn that when these things happen, it just means you pivot. It doesn't mean the end of anything. It just means, I wonder what next chapter is going to look like now for me, now that I get to shift things a little bit.
And I think that there's, and I think I believe this was true for Hillary Clinton after in 2016. I think that, she took some quiet time. And I think that's actually a really great antidote to what do I really want, to really figuring that out, because we are we have our routines. We do so many things just out of habit. So if you're looking for your next chapter, there's a lot to be said for taking some time out. Well, whether that's a weekend or whether that's even just a day, and it could be working with someone, but to get out of your, just to get out of your routine and everything that's around you.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And that also is not always easy. It's certainly not always easy for me. But, my brain is always on, so I'm always like, I need to do this.
None of this is easy.
So, right.
If it were easy, everybody would do it, right?
Right. It's much harder
about taking responsibility
than it is to work hard,
Yeah.
And then, you want to say, when people say that to you, you just want to be like, oh, but it's so true. It's so true. I'm going to get more done if I do less. Is that what I'm hearing? But it is the truth, because you can take the minute, you take a beat and just like say, all right, what is the next path? And you're not wasting as much time spinning your wheels. At least that's been my experience.
So I want to tell you, we're talking about the doing more by doing less. And I want to say that one of the things that I tell my clients, even in a meeting, is to take a minute to get themselves there as a leader, and to give everybody in the meeting just a minute, literally a minute, to breathe, to do whatever, to sit quietly. Right. That's and great. I do encourage them to learn to lead and help people learn to breathe just for a minute. Yeah. But you're coming here, you're coming into a meeting and you're thinking about that last thing. You're not even really here and then you're thinking about the next thing. So just to take a few breaths.
Right.
And that's
another thing that I think
to be resilient.
Well, and I think that's also something at least I had to unlearn, right? Because I was
Yeah.
multitasking was a thing we were taught was such a great thing. And now we're like, multitasking is like, no, like you get way less done when you multitask. And we're learning, we know better, we do better, but it is so true. One of the things that I'll give everybody listening a little tip. One of the things that I teach my clients when I work with them on their marketing process is before I get on these recordings or before I get on a call with somebody, a prospect that might be a thing, I block 10 minutes before my calendar and I'm just quiet. I just everything goes away.
Yeah.
All of the windows get shut on my computer. As much gets cleared off my desk as possible. And I just kind of tune in, right? To tune into them. Maybe I'll pull up their LinkedIn profile and kind of look at their picture and say, all right, I'm just about to get on this call. And I just kind of just step back and release all the crap from the day. And then, just so I can be fully present as I move into that, because that, that is, I think, the number one predictor of your success on those enrollment calls is your attention is fully on that. And it's not going to be if you did 15 things and you came sliding into your desk 10 seconds before you got on that Zoom call.
Yeah. That is magic. That is gold. And no one else can be present for you. Right. You actually have to do that yourself. Right. And that's, again, it's like closing things down, being with yourself, being with your breath, managing yourself, whatever, if there are thoughts coming up, like, that's maybe not helpful. Or if you think of something, oh my gosh, I forgot this. Well, just write it down. And so that you can bring your full self there, because the power of your presence is really what's going to get you your clients. It's going to help you connect with your team. That is the power.
Yep.
Right? People feel it.
Half the time we're not, I remember when that book, The 4-Hour Work, came out, which, by the way, I don't love most of it. I think is a lot. I don't know. Anyway, I will talk about a piece that I did like. One of the things that I did like was he really talked about like just being fully present when you're working, and when you do things like, for example, turn off your email for an hour if you need to focus on something. And I remember thinking, I can't turn my email off for an hour. You know what? If anybody really needs me, they can find me. And it just checking how many hours a day do you spend just being distracted by your phone, by your email, by all the things. And I think that we don't even realize sometimes how we could probably cut our time and sitting at our desks in half if we just learned how to be more conscious, right, of what we're doing.
Absolutely.
At that moment in time.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not just about, writing down your, having your agenda, but it's about organizing yourself. How am I organizing myself to be fully present with what needs to be done? And when you're present, you can cut it in half. So,
yeah. So, all right. So back to conscious leadership. Okay.
Yes.
So we now know that conscious leaders, we want to focus on the fact that we can be a conscious leader and be conscious of where we're at right now, knowing that,
I would say that being present is part of that, right? So being present, learning how to shift, like when you get triggered by something, learn how to shift. What is it you need to do? And also understanding how you get reactive, because understanding and feeling like if you know that something or someone bugs you, and that when that happens, you're going to get upset. If you know that's going to happen, you can start to feel that happen and catch yourself and do something different.
So Meg, let's go back to conscious leadership then. What if we want to step more into, if we want to listen, everybody listening to this show, I hope, understands the importance of building a brand that focuses on leadership. And frankly, I think everybody in this planet, certainly over the age of 30 or 40, is a leader in one way, shape, or form, whether it's in your family, with your kids, with your parents, or whether it's at work with people you work with, or maybe it was in your kid's school or whatever, who knows? But as we step into that and we start to own that, and we want to incorporate more of this conscious leadership in, because I think that that's again, if we don't stand out, we're invisible. So that's going to help us stand out. How do we get started? What are the few steps to take to get started with conscious leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things that I think is super important is for people to understand their own leadership style, because we're all
Okay.
different, but there are like 9 archetypes that I work with. And when you know your leadership style, for instance, if you know that as a leader you are really keyed into relationships, that kind of is your go-to, or as a leader you are really the person who is the perfectionist, you are looking for you know making things perfect, or maybe you're the achiever. So being successful is super important to you. So it's important to know your leadership style. So it's a way of advancing your self-awareness, and self-awareness is key to this. And when you know your leadership style, then you go, it's like, oh, it's kind of, it can be narrow in a way, and we want to make it like, by helping you see your blind spots, we want to make your style like, let you play all the keys, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
when things are going, you know, when things are going to heck, like, you want to be able to have a big range. You want to be able to take on whatever it is. And that could be not just being, the diving in, it could actually be standing back. So
You know
you
what?
need
That's
to figure this out.
And what I love about that, Meg, is that it keeps when you're in that's kind of going back a little bit to being in your zone of genius, right? When you know what style works for you,
Mhm.
then you're more comfortable. Like the premise behind Good Girls Get Rich is when you do what you're good at, that's where abundance comes into your life, right? So when you
Yes.
find a way to understand your leadership style, and then you build your everything you're doing around that style, you're more comfortable, you're more confident and
Hmm.
more effective, I think, as a leader. And again, standing out. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is really important for knowing to help manage your reactivity, because
Mm.
when things go wrong, when stuff blows up. I remember being in the airport. I don't know if you remember, like a few months ago, when the computers went down in the airport, in like around
Oh,
the world, like
yes.
everything went down.
Yeah, yeah,
I was
yeah.
in the
Yeah.
airport then. It was chaos. I mean, and people were
Oh my
losing
gosh.
their stuff. They were losing it. And that's the kind of thing,
I
that's the
get. I mean,
unpredictability that
right.
we live with. So it's not just an election. It's our software, and it's our software on a grand scale, but it could also be your software on a small scale. And,
Right.
and how do you react to that? What are the
Right.
voices that you hear in your head, and how do you get yourself present again
Right.
when
Right.
that happens?
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's so good. Any other tips on kind of stepping into your conscious leadership era?
Yeah, yeah. And finding out how you get reactive. And this is actually a really, it's an exercise that I do with my clients at the very beginning also, because it's one I ask them to put by their, to hang by their, or post by their phone or their computer. And that is like, how do you get reactive? What kinds of things, when something happens, when it hits the fan, what do you hear yourself saying? Do you hear yourself saying the shoulds or the can'ts, or they're wrong, right? Or what do you have to believe? Do you have to think that there's something happening out there, a threat? Or maybe there are only two options, right? A this or the that, but there's always a third way.
Mm.
But we don't see that third way when we're feeling defensive.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah. And when you start to catch yourself, because this is all about practice, and that is, it's really hard for us to make change and to learn these things alone.
Mm.
And that's where a coach comes in, or a group comes in. And you know that from your groups, right?
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
one person has an aha, everybody gets that aha.
Absolutely. And one of the things I love about groups is like the whole lateral learning effect of it. I mean, I'd love to sit there. Well, I wouldn't even love to sit there. I definitely don't sit there and say, and I am the only one that knows anything in this group because I'm the leader of the group. Heck no. I learn from them every single day,
Yeah.
and I want them to learn from each other as well. I facilitate the group. It doesn't mean that I am the know all end all of everything. And I think that that's so key. But Meg, that takes us right to what my next question was going to be, which is, how do you work with people? How do people get support from you on this? Because it's not easy to see, it's kind of like trying to see the outside of the jar from the label from the inside of the jar, right? How do we start to learn?
Yeah.
How do you help people
That's a
start
great
to learn this?
analogy. How do you see your blind spots? I don't know. Have you ever put your makeup on when you're looking in the side view mirror? Well, that's not the place. That's not actually where you're supposed to put your lipstick on, but we do it, right?
Right,
But that
right.
side view mirror is to help you actually see your blind spots, right? It's to help you see what you can't see. And that's what a group does. And so when I work with people, I work, one-to-one coaching, but I also do these deep dives in my beautiful Santa Cruz home, which is a time for people to get away from their own stuff and see their blind spots. And that's one way. And then also I'm actually coming up pretty soon, the new year, a program where people will come in and learn these leadership skills, and they'll learn them in a group and with me, so they will get to see their blind spots.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all your links in the show notes for this, but tell us a little bit about how people can get a taste of this work. Is there something that they can do to check you out in the meantime?
Yes. So in the meantime, I do. You can put the link in it. I have an ebook on leading in uncertain times, which I'm sure will be as relevant in a few months as it is today. And
exactly.
I also offer master classes. So if you sign up and get on my mailing list, then you will get all of that, or you can just jump right to it. If you resonated with what we talked about here and you want to jump on a call with me, just that will also be in the show notes, that you can just book a 30-minute call, and we will see how, talk about how you can lead better in uncertain times.
I love that. And I highly recommend you book a call with Meg. I mean, anytime anybody offers you that, if you're listening to this, take them up on it, because it's, you'll learn a little bit. I know you'll learn a lot from a call with Meg, but you'll also learn a little bit about, we don't know what we don't know. And if you've been, as you're coming through the end, if you're coming like sliding into home plate at the end of 2024 here, if 2024 isn't everything you wanted it to be, then we got to think about what we could do differently in 2025. And you need to get somebody else's eyes on that. So whether it's Meg or whether it's me or somebody, you need to get your eyes on that. So I definitely recommend that you book that call with Meg for sure. And I think that 2025 is going to be a good year for us all entrepreneurs, regardless of what happens in the next couple months. What we've learned in the last few years is that what we can always count on is ourselves, right? So the more you invest in yourself, the more you invest in your, you becoming a better person, a better leader, more conscious, more skilled, showing up differently, the better chance you're going to have of success. We can't rely on our bosses to just give us raises anymore. That just doesn't, the world. I mean, there are people doing that, but we can affect that by investing in ourselves so that we can kind of make that happen as opposed to waiting for it to happen. Right. So I love that. Meg, thank you so much for sharing everything you shared here with us today. Meg talked about understanding your leadership style. That leads right into something that we do here. I have a what's your marketing style quiz or assessment that you can check out at linkedinquiz.com. And that somehow that link doesn't always work. So if you go to my website, KarenYankovich.com/quiz, or just KarenYankovich.com, it's all over the place. But that's why I jumped in on that. Like when, if LinkedIn is your jam, right? Or your clients are on LinkedIn and you just don't know where to start, this assessment is where you want to start, because some people do like the relationships. They want to talk to people. Other people want to write a white paper, and other people like and it's all okay, right? It's all okay. And when you understand that it's all okay, and you have, in this assessment, we give you some tips on how to get started, but not only how to get started, some things to watch out for, right? Because there's lots of tips. You can Google everything, right? But I want you to understand too, based on your style, what you might be like, if you're white paper, you might be doing a lot. Like I can think of one of my current clients, and if you're listening, you know who you are, who actually wrote a white paper, beautiful, amazing white paper. And I can't tell you, once a week I say, okay, can we put the to-do list down and actually get some clients? Like she's so good at making herself more to-dos on her to-do list, right? And that's her nature and that's her style. But that's why I love to work with her, because I can kind of poke her a little bit when I see that happening too much, right?
Yeah.
So in this assessment, you get a little bit of that. And because I do agree with Meg that your energy is so important, you also get some visualizations to help you start your day with, how you
visualizations are so powerful.
Yeah.
So powerful.
Yeah. I love them. I love them. And I think it's so interesting because, I created them, but you create them and then you move on. Right. And sometimes I'll go back and listen to them. I'm like, oh, that's good. So they really are good. And they're short, and it just gets you, to take a beat, like we talked about, just sit for a minute and just kind of center yourself for the day and just move through your day more powerfully. So check that out. And of course, if you want to know what it looks like to get some help, if you want to know a little bit about our She's Linked Up ecosystem of programs, we've shifted everything for 2025. So I'd love to tell you about them. If we've talked before, we need to talk again. There's a spot in the show notes as well to book a call for that. So Meg, thank you so much for being here today. It was so much fun to do this. And I can't wait to see what's in store for you as we move into the new year. I know you've got some fun things going on personally. Meg's got grandbaby on its way, which talk about shifting your identity, right? We didn't even get into that, but talk about identity shifting. That is massive. It's a massive identity shift, that first grandbaby. So I can't wait.
And it's so interesting. It's so interesting because, when I had my kids, I didn't think about any of that. Like I didn't think about, what it meant actually to be a parent.
Yep.
And, this is like another thing. And what is my identity? And,
Yep. So I can't wait for you to experience that, because I have, and it is a whole lot of fun. All right. Thanks for everybody for listening to us. I'll be back here next week with another episode. And Meg, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you. And see you on LinkedIn.